Last time we were talking all about how evolution can happen through natural selection. So we listed the 4 rules that a population of anything needs so that it can evolve through natural selection. They were, we need too many offspring so that some can be eliminated. Those offspring need to have some kind of variation that makes them different from each other and is going to give someone a survival advantage. And the last thing is those animals that have a survival advantage actually have to reproduce more often. And that makes sense because we're trying to change the gene pool of the next generation. This is just one way that evolution can happen. It's just one way that the gene pool of a population can change. Usually the phrase we give it is survival of the fittest. Today, we're moving on from natural selection because we want to learn about the other ways that gene pools can change, and they're a lot weirder. Is all evolution because of natural selection? You're correct if you said no way! Evolution is just a change in the gene pool, and there are a few other ways that we can cause that. The 3 that we're going to learn today are genetic drift, gene flow, and sexual selection. We are going to go in order today, and we're going to try really hard to make sure we know the difference between drift and flow. By the end of this video, you're going to be able to read a situation and decide which of these 3 patterns it follows. Genetic drift is just a random change in the frequency of alleles of a population over time. So one trait or allele gets more common literally just because of randomness. This only happens in really small populations, which makes sense because a random change in a big population is just a drop in the bucket. But if you have a random change in a small population, that can have a way bigger effect. So check out this example on the bottom. On the far left, we have like the beginning. So imagine that this is the parent generation all the way on the left. I'm going to randomly select the flowers that reproduce by circling them. So boom, here are the flowers in that generation that survive and reproduce. Why? Just random pollination by bees. None of them was better than the other. There's no reason they got chosen. It was just random. We happen to have 2 red flowers and 1 white flower selected. Okay, they are going to produce the second generation. So in the middle, here we have generation 2, and they are the offspring. You can tell that the gene for red and the gene for white are just as common as they were before. So we have not seen genetic drift happen yet. But check this out. If I circle the random parents in generation 2, because my random selection has only chosen red flowers, I'm going to cause genetic drift. I'm going to change the gene pool just because in a small population, I randomly chose some members to reproduce and others not to. So if these 3 red and random flowers are the parents, check out how the offspring are now all red. They all have the same phenotype. So the red trait became more popular, and it doesn't mean red flowers are better. They don't have an adaptation. It's just because we randomly selected parents from a really, really small group. Gene flow sounds similar to drift. I know, it sounds like we're drifting and flowing in the ocean, like on a boat or something, but be careful because gene flow is actually really different. Gene flow is when genes move in or out of a population because one animal migrates or moves in from somewhere else. By adding these brand new genes and brand new traits into the population, they increase the variation available. They increase the amount of different traits that a creature can have. So down in this diagram, what you're seeing is, imagine the original population of these beetles in America is yellow. And in another country, the beetles are the same species, but they happen to have a different trait for color. They're blue instead. Well, if one of them migrates to our American beetle population, they're going to add their genes to the pool. So in gene flow, we introduce new genes to the pool, and that's a form of evolution. The gene pool is different now. And it's just because someone moved from somewhere else. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to play the worst game show, and it's called Drift or Flow. So for each situation, you will decide if you are seeing genetic drift, random choices in a small population causing big changes in the gene pool, or gene flow, the gene pool changing because someone migrated into it. Let's do one. Okay. 100 humans from Scotland are chosen to populate the moon. They fly there on a spaceship and start the human population there. Many years later, the moon's human gene pool is actually different from the gene pool on Earth. Try it out for yourself, drift or flow. You are correct if you said that this is genetic drift. First, I'll tell you why it's not flow, and then I'll tell you why it is drift. Gene flow can only happen if individuals move into a population that exists. There are no people on the moon to join. Like, the moon's empty. So when the 100 Scottish people moved there, they weren't changing the gene pool of the moon, they were establishing the gene pool of the moon. They were the first people there, so they weren't moving into a population, they were just moving to a brand new place. That's why it's not flow. We didn't move into an existing population. Here's why it is drift. When we chose 100 people from Scotland, we made the population small, and we picked a random section of it that happened to be a little different than the rest of the Earth. When we put that population of 100 people on the moon, random choices of who has offspring and who does not are going to change the pool. Imagine that it's possible on the moon, maybe way more people will have red hair after we let the generations go on for a while because they all have Scottish genes. Now, having more red hair than people on Earth might not seem like a big deal, but it represents a change in the gene pool. The people on the moon have red hair more often, so they have a different gene more often than Earth. So that's why this is genetic drift, and yes, it would be a form of human evolution. Let's try another one. A volcano erupts in the squirrel community. There used to be thousands of squirrels, but after the disaster, there's only 100 squirrels in the area. These particular squirrels happen to be mostly brown. They weren't faster. They are not better. They just happened to survive. Many years later, after the squirrel population recovers, there are thousands of squirrels again, and most of those squirrels are brown. Do you think it's drift or flow? You are correct if you said it is drift again. It's not flow because nobody moved in. Nobody migrated in this situation. Genetic drift is when a population gets small and random members are chosen to reproduce. The population shrunk down because of the natural disaster of the volcano, and the 100 squirrels that lived just happened to be mostly brown, just because of randomness and where the squirrels were standing at the time of the volcanic eruption. They're not better, they just happened to be randomly chosen to be in the right place at the right time. And that ended up changing the gene pool. So instead of being gray, that squirrel population is brown. Another one. A particular species of stink bug is not native to North America. They actually first arrived in Pennsylvania in the late 90s. A few of these bugs were accidentally brought on a cargo plane, and they established a large population. Now, this species is slightly different in North America compared to its native population in Asia. I am trying to trick you. Is this drift or flow? Hear me out. I think you could make a good argument for either one, but I'm going to call it drift. And here's why. It's not telling us that these stink bugs moved into existing stink bug populations in America. It's just saying they came to America on a boat, cargo plane. And they established a new population that got bigger, 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 and bigger. So we're going to call this genetic drift because a few settlers came to America And those bug settlers had the population grow and grow and grow and grow. And because of the random bugs that started that population and the choices that randomly led to which bugs reproduced or not, the gene pool became different from the original Asian stink bug population. Remember that genetic drift is all about randomness. No bug is actually better than the other one. No one has an adaptation. It's just random choices that influence the future. Here we go again, drift or flow. The giant panda is an endangered species found in zoos in North America, China, and other countries around the globe. In order to increase genetic diversity and prevent inbreeding of giant pandas, zookeepers swap genetic material across the globe for artificial insemination of pandas in captivity. Is this genetic drift or is this gene flow? You are correct if you chose gene flow this time. Oop, sorry. This is an example of gene flow because we are transporting genetic material from one population to another. So literally, we are going to send sex cells from a panda in the United States to a zoo in China so that we can have traits from American pandas that are going to enter the gene pool of pandas in China. We have an established population in China that we're bringing genes to. If you enter a new gene pool, that is gene flow. I have one last thing to show you guys, and it is the third type of evolution. This is one way that evolution can happen, and it's called sexual selection, and I think just the unofficial mascot of this is the peacock. Hear me out. Look at that peacock down there. You would think, literally, why does an animal look like that? Like, what could possibly be the benefit of being so ridiculous looking? Like, the huge tail, the crazy color, predators can see you, okay? They know you're there. They're going to eat you. You're slow because you have that huge tail. And it's a huge waste of resources. Like, you're gonna eat all of this food and invest all that energy in growing a tail that doesn't even help you do anything? Why? Like, what is the point of this animal? How did it evolve to be like this? That doesn't make any sense. Well, I'm here to make it make sense. Well, this peacock has attractive traits, and they might not actually be good for his personal survival fitness, but without being really cute, you can't pass on your genes. So peacocks are in this kind of weird pattern of evolution where they might live really long if they're ugly, but they won't have any offspring. But if a peacock is beautiful and bright and has a really huge tail, he might die young, but have a lot of offspring because lady peacocks find him incredibly attractive and irresistible. Sexual selection in the wild actually usually is only for male animals. So it is a male peacock that looks so crazy and is trying to impress all of the ladies. And there are a lot of other birds especially, and other animals that do special mating dances or have special, bright, crazy features that make them attractive to a mate. We think that the reason this evolved is that females are looking for mates who are good at finding food, good at running from predators, and will maybe have good, healthy genes. When males have crazy sexual traits like the big peacock tail, it tells a female animal, okay, this bird that I might want as my bird husband clearly can find enough food to support his extravagant tail. He's probably pretty fast because he's survived a long time, even though he is like a beacon to predators. So it's a sign to me. His crazy tail is telling me that he has some pretty good DNA, so I'm going to pick him so that my offspring also have good DNA because I want my offspring to live a long, long time. Here's a summary for what we've learned today. Is all evolution because of natural selection? Heck no, we just learned 3 alternatives to natural selection. Yes, of course, survival of the fittest is one way that a gene pool can change, and it probably makes the most sense to us that beneficial adaptations make animals live longer and have more offspring. But it's also true that in a small population, random choices can really swing the gene pool in different directions and cause huge change eventually. It's also true that new creatures migrating into our existing gene pools can add their brand new genes and change the pool that way. And the last way that the gene pool can change is when female animals choose to mate with male animals with huge, showy traits. It's called sexual selection because it's not the best at surviving that reproduce the most often, it is the best at being attractive that are going to pass on their genes the most often. I hope that helped. Please come into office hours if you have questions.